It's a face, an angel's face that has haunted the French press for so many years, the face of Gregory. The Gregory affair is the most enigmatic news item of the end of the 20th century.
Do you think that you know the murderer? The one who killed your son?
I know him. I know him, yes.
Everything about the life of this family, the Villemin from Lépanges sur Vosges, has been said, told, and photographed.
We thought maybe I'll shake hands with the murderer. It obsessed us.
My brother-in-law, Bernard, he's innocent.
A man is dead. Jean-Marie Villemin, Gregory's father, believed him to be his son's murderer, so he coldly shot him dead. The mother was long accused of the murder of her son. And yet, so many years later, we know nothing or very little. We do not know how Gregory was killed, nor why, nor by whom. We will probably never know. Yet it remains a unique investigation with its crow, its little judge, this family full of unspoken secrets. These detective journalists who sometimes think they are vigilantes, and in the end, a real legal disaster. Gregory was a 4-year-old little boy, the son of Christine and Jean-Marie Villemin. They lived in a small village, Lépanges sur Vosges, in the Vosges. On October 16, 1984, shortly after 5 p.m., Gregory disappeared in front of his home. The gendarmes were immediately notified. They searched the village. Night fell. By the light of their torch, they approached the river in the neighboring town of Docelles.
Around 9 p.m. on the radio, we'd got a call. We'd found him. For a moment, I had a second of hope that the nightmare was over and that this child was found safe. In fact, it was not the case. The nightmare was only just beginning because Gregory's body was found in Docelles in the Vologne River.
The child was dead. His body had been found, fully clothed, washed up on a dam 7 kilometers away from Lépanges.
When I had to examine him, I was shocked to see him bound. It sometimes happens that we have to report a drowned person, an accident, etc. But there, this bound body, it immediately made us think it was a criminal case.
We observed that he was attached from the feet to the head. That is to say, his feet were bound, his legs with his hands in front of his body. The same cord which tied him also passed around his neck, but he was not tied very, very tightly. His beanie was pulled down over his face, and when we rose it, we discovered the face of a child who seemed to be sleeping, who was serene.
He had no marks of blows. We could also have thought that, in the river, his body would have been mishandled, etc., rolled into the waterfalls, but there were no signs at all of deterioration, no tearing of clothes, etc.
Why had a 4-year-old child been thrown into the cold waters of the Vologne River? It was a crazy move. It seemed as if the child had been sacrificed in front of everyone. Two journalists witnessed the discovery. Philippe Jéchou worked for La Liberté de l'Est. He was with a photographer from the newspaper.
It was near the tufts of grass that Gregory's body was found, and it was approximately 9:15 p.m. What was shocking was that the water was cold. A little 4-year-old. People had also seen the hood over his face, the tied hands, etc., and this very, very cold claim 2 or 3 hours before.
In fact, the crime was claimed over the telephone barely half an hour after the child's disappearance. Immediately, Christine and Jean-Marie Villemin understood that their son had been kidnapped to be killed.
The family told us they received a phone call around 5:30 p.m. It was one of Jean-Marie's brothers, Michel, who received the phone call. He was told that the child had been kidnapped and thrown into the Villemin River. This is why our searches were focused on this river and why we were able to find the body quite quickly.
According to Gregory's uncle, it was a hoarse voice that claimed responsibility for the crime. The Villemin family knew this voice well.
The family quickly named the Crow, a poison pen letter writer, as the author of the murder. So we discovered that a crow had actually been harming the Villemin family in the broad sense during the previous years.
A child found bound hand and foot in a river. A murderous crow, obviously. The next day, the case made the front page of the local press. The striking photos of the discovery of the body were published in La Liberté de l'Est.
This photo sums it all up. We can see this rescuer who, from a distance like this, I imagine he's a lumberjack, who is holding something very frail in his arms. The guy doesn't know what to do. I don't know, it's a tragedy.
Laurence Lacour was a young journalist at that time. This was her first big news item. She didn't know, of course, that this affair would turn her life upside down. Laurence Lacour, you, at the time, were a correspondent for Europe 1, the radio, in the east of France. When did you arrive?
Oddly enough, I didn't arrive the next day. My editors considered the affair sordid. They advised me to go cover another story around Strasbourg.
The photos of Gregory's little body in the river, which were published by Liberté de l'Est, did you see them before arriving there, or were you already there?
I see them before, since they are published a few hours before my arrival in the field. So it's true that they grab me, as they will grab everyone who sees them. I remember that at the time, I was barely 27 years old. My colleagues did not want me to see these photos. They told me, no, don't look at them, it's too hard. They wanted to protect me in a sense. I was a young woman. These pictures were not hard to see, in the sense that there was no blood or bruising. But they were very hard, because in fact, it was as if we were witnessing the assassination within a few minutes or hours. So it was a sort of slightly delayed crime, and it was a very strong emotional factor for us, which immediately immersed us in the heart of the affair.
In your opinion, these photos, so this one here, contributed to attracting journalists like magnets to the Villemin Valley?
To my knowledge, there had been no photos of child corpses published in the French press before that. In the press of eastern France, certainly not. And these are the kind of photos that generally remain in criminal identification files. As luck would have it, there was a photographer there at that time. And then there was, as if this affair had a vocation to be in the media, to be pictured. And that photo was all the more striking because the next day, we could put it next to this photo here.
Gregory's?
There you have it, Gregory's, which had been taken by a professional photographer a few weeks earlier. His parents, for his 4th birthday, had had his portrait taken. As if there, too, there was some omen, because we rarely have such a beautiful photo of a victim of a news item, since he himself had just posed in front of a professional photographer. So comparing these pictures was a very, very strong shock. How can you expect journalists not to be paralyzed by all these elements, which will make them settle in the area, waiting for an outcome which will never happen for other reasons, and then 18 years later, we are still talking about it.
The day after the crime, Jean-Michel Bézina, RTL's correspondent in the East, had got a scoop. He immediately collected Jean-Marie Villemin's confidences on the threshold of his house. A father's grief and terrible suspicions.
Jean-Marie Villemin, you and your wife are young. Are you thinking, why? Who resents you so much?
I don't know. I don't want to know.
Do you have some kind of idea?
I have one, but I'm keeping it.
Sincerely, Jean-Marie Villemin, do you think that you know the murderer, the one who killed your son?
I know him. I know him, yes.
These words from the father of the murdered child aroused the curiosity of journalists, especially since that morning of October 17th. Gregory's father received a letter from the day before, at 5:15 p.m., from the village. The Crow had just claimed responsibility for Gregory's murder a second time, this time in writing.
C'est un billet très court, la lettre dit textuellement ce n'est pas ton argent qui pourra te redonner ton fils, voilà ma vengeance, pauvre con.
The police discovered that this letter was not a first. In addition to hundreds of phone calls, the Crow had already written to the Villemin family 3 times the previous year. First of all, it is a word slipped into the shutters of the house in Lépanges. The Villemin family. I will kill you. Then Gregory's grandparents received 2 letters. In them, the Crow calls out the boss, meaning Jean-Marie. He should no longer be frequented. Otherwise, the mysterious Crow will carry out their threats on the boss and his little family.
What do we find in these 3 letters? What are the words, the themes that reappear all the time? It's revenge, hatred, money, and the boss.
Haine, argent et le chef.
Gregory was sacrificed to the hatred, to the desire for revenge that someone felt against Jean-Marie. That is something that is clear.
On the ground, the police are looking for clues. There are no witnesses to the kidnapping. The mother says he was playing on this pile of gravel in front of the house. She was ironing laundry inside. She saw nothing, heard nothing. Neither do the neighbors. Ms. Claudin, who had been going to gather her cows at the appointed time, did not notice anything unusual. The gendarmes then focused their search on the place where the body had been discovered. Docelles.
Walking along the Villemin River, they first tried to locate all the places where the corpse could have been thrown from. Apparently, it had to be between 2 dams because otherwise the body would have been damaged, or his hood torn off, or something like that. So they were walking along the river, and they went back to the first dam here. And then nearby, a few meters from here, they spotted traces of a car that had maneuvered there.
Alongside these tire marks, investigators also discovered the imprint of a heel. But was that the actual crime scene? To find out, they decided to reconstruct the body's journey in the river using a life-size doll.
The test from this location led us to note the impossibility of the body being thrown there, since at first it gets stuck on a kind of reservoir with a lot of brush, which it only manages to cross with difficulty. And then it arrives a little further at the mouth of the Vologne and the Barba rivers, and ends up in a place very far from the one where the body was found.
A new test in the center of Docelles, behind the fire department, was much more conclusive. The mannequin ended its journey at the exact place where the child's body had been recovered. But then why hadn't anyone seen anything, in broad daylight, in the heart of the village? Naturally, as soon as the body was brought back, the prosecution ordered an autopsy. Unfortunately, it was an incomplete autopsy, which we regretted a lot later on. The forensic doctors seemed to consider that Gregory had simply been tied up and thrown into the river, where he drowned. So he did not have the water from the lungs or the viscera analyzed. That was a first capital error, as we will never know the exact time and circumstances of Gregory's death. The gendarmes thought that, to arrest the murderer, they must unmask the Crow. They brought dozens of journalists in their wake.
Journalists as a whole sensed a good deal in the commercial sense, in the sales sense, in the dramatic sense of the term. We felt that this affair was going to sell well, that it was going to bounce back, etc. And so the idea of a good deal had supplanted the pain of individuals in this tragedy. And it's true that at the cemetery, there was no restraint. It was awful.
The entire French press was there for the day of Gregory's funeral. Journalists, cameramen, photographers, all around the child's grave.
The funeral degenerated a bit because a cameraman got as close as possible to the family to try to film the mother, who had just fainted. Some people who reacted, they started throwing stones at the press. There was shouting, pushing, and shoving. So it ended in general confusion. The mother was evacuated. She didn't even see her child buried. It was terrible.
There were now more journalists than gendarmes on site. And of course, everyone was coming up with theories. Some even played detectives, like Jean Kerr, a senior reporter at Paris Match, who did not give up on the police for one moment.
What was quite amusing, if you like, was that we, the journalists, when there were 5 Renault 4 leaving the gendarmerie simultaneously, each of us would follow one. Then we'd arrive, they'd come down, knock on the door, a couple would come out, they'd took them in, and come back to the gendarmerie. We'd all met there, so we knew what they had done.
It sometimes even happened that journalists came before the police.
I was lucky to be the first to meet all the families. I'd even tell the gendarmes I was lucky. I arrived before you. The gendarmes would tell the families, do not speak to journalists, and do not give a photo. Fortunately, I had been there before them.
I won't hide from you that it happened, that it was quite embarrassing for the gendarmes who arrived afterwards. Because ultimately, there were elements of the investigation, which had not been carried out, by the way, or not always in any case, that were found in this or that press body. So there was this kind of confusion, which was particularly embarrassing for the investigation.
To try to channel journalists, the gendarmes hold press briefings twice a day on the steps of the gendarmerie. It was a perilous exercise. How can one talk about the investigation without revealing its secrets?
Without restraint or fear.
When they were facing journalists and they were pressed for questions, instead of closing their notebook once they had finished their press release, they'd begin to answer questions.
There were 2 witnesses?
No, there was only one.
There was another person.
They were together. 2 witnesses next to each other. It's not interesting. Here we have 2 different people.
Thanks to the journalists?
No, we already had the information. The person from Docelles had called the day after the kidnapping. There you go, thank you. We are having a meeting with the prosecutor. Unlock the door, please.
At what time tomorrow? Tomorrow, yes?
One day, Captain Sesmet told us, we are on the trail of a howling wolf in the jungle, and we are going to catch it. What else have we been told? It's an extraordinary story. You will see when you know it. There are skeletons in the closets. Obviously, when you have 30 or 40 journalists who are there, waiting for information, who are waiting for events, you should not tell them things like that.
The mistake we made was perhaps to let people believe that the matter would be resolved quickly. So much so that journalists arrived in numbers, imagining every evening that we were going to find out who this odious crow was.
I readily admit that we did not know how to deal with a new situation, which was the influence of the press and all the media in a judicial investigation.
Oddly, it was the editorial staff of Europe 1 who suggested a lawyer to Gregory's parents, Mr. Henri-René Garot. The radio was undoubtedly hoping to obtain indiscretions on the file. The arrival of this right-wing tenor of the bar gave the affair a national impact. And in Epinal, Mr. Garot met up with an old acquaintance of his, Jean Kerr.
I told Garot, stop on the side of the road. He asks, what do you want? I say, everything, to go into the house, take photos, the letter from the crow. Is that all you want? I say, yes, you got it.
Maître Garot presented Jean Kerr to Christine and Jean-Marie Villemin as a trustworthy man. They were reassured, so they opened their doors wide for him.
So they opened the door to their intimacy. They lit up a way, and I had an idea. Suddenly I said, could I see the child's room? And Jean-Marie looked at me, like saying, what does he want? He's got some nerve. And Garot said, yes, we would like to see it. And I can still see Jean-Marie's hand unlocking the door, and then the door opening, and there was a large frame with the child's portrait. Incredible. There were toys, stuffed animals, as if they were waiting for the return of the little boy. Gregory, it was a very strong image to me, and I said, Jean-Marie, please allow me. I'd like to take a picture. He looked at Christine and told me, hurry up, do it quickly then. Afterwards, we went into the kitchen. We chatted a little. I said, now do you have photos? Because we would like to have nice pictures for Paris Match, so everyone started looking through the drawers, the cardboard boxes, the shoe boxes, and they found pictures. I picked some of them. I got 32 photos. It was a treasure. You could call it a war chest.
Jean-Pierre also got his hands on photocopies of the Crow's letters, never yet published. The scoop was spread over a double page in Paris Match. It yielded exceptional results. It was enough to keep Gregory in the headlines for months, even years. The gendarmes were still on the Crow's trail, but who could have hated Jean-Marie Villemin to the point of writing to him after the murder, "The boss, I hope you die of grief." The boss had been the nickname of Gregory's father since he became foreman in his factory. In such a working-class environment, his success caused jealousy.
In one of the anonymous calls he received in '83, I believe, at one point, he said to his interlocutor, "But what did I do to you?" And the other replied, "I can't stand bosses." And in another call, the interlocutor told him, "You're doing too much, you're building, you're changing cars, you're going too fast." At 26, one doesn't own a car. It was a salvage car, so it wasn't the value of the car that was important in this case. We could feel that pretty quickly because the family told us so. So we understand that this young couple is the subject of quite irrational jealousy.
They were proud of their success, and that annoyed some people around them a lot. A family event that occurred 2 days before Gregory's assassination attracted the attention of the gendarmes.
Jean-Marie and Christine were welcoming his brother Michel and his wife Ginette to their home for the first time in a long time. And Jean-Marie, completely in his spirit of the time, impressed them with his success because he'd bought a leather living room, was planning to extend the house, etc. Anyway, it was an eye full for them.
What if this meeting had been the trigger that pushed the Crow to take action? All gendarmes and journalists began rummaging through the dirty little secrets of this very ordinary family.
We had found ourselves projected into a somewhat remote village world, where we felt stares, felt something unsaid, felt a kind of heaviness.
Some family secrets were unearthed. A natural child, an ancestor found hanged. What did this have to do with Gregory's murder? Nothing, without doubt, but whatever. The key to the enigma had to lie within the privacy of this family. A family that Jean-Pierre managed to bring together for picture for Paris Match.
It feels like the truth is going to come out of this photo, of these people. We think that there's a shared story among all these people, that the Crow is omnipresent. I tell myself that this family, it's a clan. I don't know if the assassin is part of this group, but he's not far behind. He has to be.
Isn't there some kind of perverted relationship at that time between you journalists and the gendarmes? Because you surround them. And they feed you like that. They give you information.
We were doing field work in a department, a region, where no one could stop us from moving around. It turns out that the families involved or the family affected by this tragedy willingly opened their doors to us at first. They did not see at first that they could fall in a trap by talking too much or giving information that would feed our papers.
You could simply go to the Villemin's house, one journalist at a time or all together, and they'd open the door?
Yes. At first, Gregory's grandparents were mines of information for us because they did not feel the risk they were taking in speaking. So it's true. We'd simply ring the bell, sit down, and have coffee with them. I think that, in the family, in the broader sense of the term, there were people who were interested in knowing what the gendarmes were doing, and we were able to tell them so, because we were following the gendarmes. We talked with them between two doors. It was all really very messy, a very effervescent atmosphere.
So you were informing the family about what the gendarmes had told you, right?
Quite. We are able to tell them, for instance, there's a gendarmerie van in front of Mr. X's house. At the time, we didn't realize what we were doing. We were surely giving information to people who could use it to protect themselves from the investigation. Everyone had an interest in this cross-investigation game.
At that time, for example, were you trying to identify the crow? Was it a challenge that you all had set for yourself?
We can't say we'd set it so deliberately, because we knew that's not what we were here for. I think what fascinated us was meeting these people, who we didn't know at all at the time, and saying to ourselves, maybe it's him, maybe I'll shake the murderer's hand. It obsessed us.
Do you remember from time to time that he's the one at the heart of it all?
He was quickly forgotten. Contrary to appearances, he was quite quickly forgotten. Very quickly, the heart of our concern was no longer the child himself. It was the idea that we'd become actors in some play, some players in a game, and that we had power in informing people. That maybe we were going to help cornering the culprit, and that we would also be the ones to have the privilege of announcing that to the whole of France, which was supposedly waiting for us to give them the answer. It is true that the child himself was quite quickly forgotten. Of course, that contributed a lot to the excesses, obviously.
Like the journalists, the gendarmes were convinced that the crow was part of the family. So they checked everyone's alibi well beyond the first family circle. They were told that a crow likes to observe the reaction of their victims. Gregory's grandparents were the ones who received the greatest number of anonymous calls and letters. They lived in Almondsey, and the crow might be there, very close to home.
Well, as soon as we learned from the experts that the crow was someone geographically close to the people they were targeting, that is to say, the family of Albert Villemin, it was systematic. Anyone interviewed by the gendarme was subjected to a dictation. And that is how we indirectly came to Bernard Laroche.
Bernard Laroche was a first cousin of Jean-Marie Villemin. He lived on the heights of Almondsey with his wife, Marie-Ange, and their son Sebastian, 4 years old, like Gregory. Bernard Laroche's dictation attracted the attention of an expert consulted by the gendarmes. Compared to the Raven's letters, his writing was considered interesting, so the gendarmes focused on this cousin with no history.
He knew everything that happened in the family, thanks to his relationships with Michel and Jeanette, so he was someone we were interested in. On the surface, he was known as good-natured, friendly, etc. That corresponds relatively well to the profile given by experts for a potential crow.
2 weeks after Gregory's murder, the press was growing impatient. It was complaining about the slowness on the investigation. The investigating judge then decided to bring together several writing experts in Nancy, including Ms. Berichon-Sedaine, who came specially from Paris. For her, it was clear. The Raven letters had been written by the same hand. Then, she compared them to dozens of dictations carried out throughout the region, a methodical work which very quickly led to a name. The suspects.
I stayed all afternoon, where I worked on the file of 147 or 148 people I no longer remember. And what allowed me to eliminate, to focus effectively on the writing of Bernard Laroche. And there, around 5 o'clock, I called Captain Sesmat back. I told him, look, I have an opinion. That's my opinion. I can't say he's the murderer. I told him he's the one who wrote the letters.
Obviously, this opinion impressed the judge and the gendarmes, especially since a new clue on one of the letters was also discovered.
We could see quite clearly the traces of what looked like a signature.
On the claim letter?
On the claim letter, which came from a paper pile, and which therefore had received the imprint of writings previously traced on the same pile.
That imprint could be exploited. To make it readable, the letter is entrusted to Dennis Klein, a gendarme with a passion for writing expertise. To reveal the furrows printed on the paper, he shines a light beam across the sheet.
With adapted means, like grazing life, with a grazing incidence, we could see an L and a B, indeed. Very clearly, it was a letter L, a calligraphic letter L, with a large start, curved at the superior part, and the letter B was a typographic letter, indeed a quite common typographic B.
And oddly, when you superimpose the L and the B engraved in the letter of the crow with the real signature of Bernard Laroche, well, it fits. It fitted so well that the next day, Laroche and his wife were taken into custody and immediately questioned, but with no result. So, after 24 hours, in the absence of a confession, they are released.
The police suspected me because I had handwriting that resembled that of the crow. Either way, I stood my ground. I stood my ground. It wasn't mine. I have a clear conscience. They couldn't prove it was me. What do you want me to tell you? I know it's not me. I know what I'm doing.
But the gendarmes were clinging to this lead. They went through Bernard Laroche's schedule. What was he doing at the time of Gregory's kidnapping? He was, he said, in Aumonce. His wife's sister, Muriel Boll, a 15-year-old schoolgirl, confirmed it. She'd seen him in Aumonce around 5:20 p.m. She was coming home from school. The gendarmes were not convinced. Details didn't add up.
After some time, Muriel broke down and finally admitted that she had not told the truth. She admitted that she had returned home with Bernard Laroche, who had come to pick her up from school, but that together they'd left for Lépanges, and that she'd seen him kidnap little Gregory. Muriel was now talking about a first stop in the center of Lépanges, then a second on a square in Docelle. Bernard Laroche's son, little Sébastien, was also in the car. She was taking care of him and didn't pay attention, she said, to what her brother-in-law was doing. Muriel did not say she'd witnessed Gregory's assassination, his tying up, or the throwing of his body into the river. But she said she'd seen Bernard Laroche take Gregory for a moment, getting out of the car and returning a few minutes later without him. Muriel Boll repeated her testimony in front of several gendarmes. She was therefore placed in custody and spent the night in the barracks.
She was examined by a doctor to whom she did not complain. And the prosecutor called the judge. He would do well to come and hear Muriel's confessions himself.
The fact of being heard by the investigating judge was a perfect guarantee, in a way. Nobody could have said afterwards that the investigating judge pressured her into talking.
But it was Friday, and Judge Lambert preferred to go away for the weekend. We'll see on Monday. So Muriel Boll was released and returned home. On Monday morning, the judge was back. Face to face in his office, Muriel Boll told her story again. Bernard Laroche had gone to get Gregory. The judge therefore ordered Laroche to be immediately arrested. The gendarmes went to his factory, with a cohort of journalists behind them. Bernard Laroche was arrested directly next to his assembly line, in front of the camera. People had wanted the assassin. Here he was.
When we see the way this arrest happened, it is extremely shocking today. Because the presumption of innocence was not a thing at the time. He left the factory and was thrown into the police car with handcuffs. He was covered in grease from his work. It was pathetic, actually. And it is certain that there, that day, and the image that will remain, it's that a culprit had been made up.
Bernard Laroche became Gregory's assassin. Why take more precautions? The two couples were jealous of each other. That made an obvious motive. The Villemin had succeeded while the Laroches had not, or less well. The Villemin had a radiant child while the Laroches had a fragile little boy. It was a portrait without nuance, but that didn't matter. For Marie-Angèle Laroche, it was a terrible shock. Her husband was in prison, accused of murdering a child. His life was being dissected. She felt tarnished by the press.
People told so many lies and untrue things. Like, for example, the story of jealousy between them and us. Frankly, no. Like when my son was passed off as mentally handicapped. My son had a problem that was operated on at birth, but he was not mentally retarded. I don't understand how people can say such mean things, even about a 4-year-old kid at that time, without knowing who people really are.
On November 5th, 1984, the lives of Bernard and Marie-Angèle Laroche were turned upside down. Forever. Bernard Laroche was charged with the assassination of Gregory. Judge Lambert welcomed the press with a little smile on his lips.
How were you able to charge him?
Thanks to a crucial testimony and partly to an expert report. These are partial results.
Is this testimony that of Muriel?
It is.
What exactly did she tell you?
I cannot tell you according to the secret of instruction.
But Muriel accompanied Bernard Laroche to the scene of the crime. She was in the car.
She was there, yes.
And Sebastian, his son too.
Yes.
He provided elements which authenticated the act, which were also confirmed during a conversation with the prosecutor in the parking lot. And by comparing these two sources of information, we were certain that Bernard Laroche was Gregory's assassin. The next morning, everyone was getting ready to leave. For us, the case was closed. It was over. Except that, as we were leaving, we passed Muriel Boll's house, and her family told us, "Come, we have to tell you something." Then Muriel Boll retracted right in front of the cameras and microphones.
They said they would put me in a reformatory. If I didn't tell the judge that, they would put me in a reformatory.
So you weren't in Bernard's car?
No, I wasn't in Bernard's car. I've never been on the dock, all that. Where the kid was drowned, I've never been there. Bernard, my brother-in-law, he's innocent. I've never been with him.
The only testimony against Bernard Laroche collapsed. That marked the turning point in the affair.
They could have seen it coming. With what had happened the day before, with her name given to the press, and with the indictment of Bernard Laroche, it was a very, very bad plan to let her go free and go back to his family. That was obvious.
For the gendarmes, if Muriel Boll changed her mind, it must be that her family had pressured her into it. The judge should never have let her go home after her hearing. She had to be kept secret, protected. But Jean-Michel Lambert seemed calm.
Personally, I was waiting for these retractions. They therefore do not surprise me at all, and they do not move me any further.
But that still considerably weakens the case.
No, because there are other elements that allow us to take little account of these retractions.
When did Muriel Boll tell the truth? In front of the gendarmes and the investigating judge? Or when she accused investigators of coercing her testimony?
48 hours in custody. You know it's very hard, very long. Poor Muriel, at the time, she was 14 years old. I imagine she might have broken down. Because I even know adults who would also have. In any case, it was all a plot, some manipulation.
We can completely admit that Muriel was impressed when finding herself in a gendarmerie brigade at her age, surrounded by 3 or 4 adult gendarmes. But we must not forget once again that her confessions were supported by the testimonies of other people. That is to say, this bus driver and her classmates, who had no interest in telling lies.
Indeed, on the evening of October 16th, Muriel Boll's friends did not see her get into the school bus after leaving school. Neither did the driver. However, she was now saying that she returned home by bus, as usual, and no longer by car with Bernard Laroche. Who to believe? The judge decided to organize a confrontation between Muriel Boll and Bernard Laroche. Investigators were confident. For them, they still held Gregory's killer. That day, the crowd, heated to death by the press, gathered in front of the Epinal courthouse. But Muriel maintained that she was not with Bernard Laroche.
When I came out, I wasn't expecting that at all. There was a whole crowd of people who were ready to lynch me. And that day, if I did not have my lawyer, I don't know what would have happened.
You, Mr. Welser, when you took on the Bernard Laroche file, it was as if he was about to be publicly hanged.
It's true. When I visited him on November 5th, 1984 at the Nancy remand prison, I only knew what was in the press and everyone was talking about his guilt. Actually, personally, not having read the file yet, I thought I was about to meet someone guilty.
And then, your attorney privilege allowed you to open the file. What's in that file?
Nothing. There was nothing. For instance, I had read in the press that there was a wiretapping between Bernard Laroche and Muriel Boll. I asked Judge Lambert about the phone tap. It doesn't exist. Handwriting analyses implicate Laroche, but when I request to see them, they don't exist. There's a case report. There were expert opinions. But not in the file. They weren't. They were not yet completed at that time. And they were not going to give the same results as what the press had released either.
What happened at that moment is that, little by little, the more you emphasized that the file was empty, the more eyes were moving away from Bernard Laroche, and the more they were moving, quietly, towards Christine Villemin, in part because of the testimonies from the girls from the post office.
Yes, it is true that, in this file, the crow, we knew that the crow must be the murderer. So we looked for the crow's identity, through writing expertise, through the testimonies of the post office girls. And these witnesses had never seen Bernard Laroche near the post office, obviously.
The post office girls were 3 work colleagues of Christine Villemin. They claimed to have seen Gregory's mother on October 16th, around 5 p.m., in front of Lépanges post office, at the exact time and place where the crow's letter was posted. Christine Villemin, not Bernard Laroche.
Every Tuesday, I stop at my sister's house near the post office. And that evening, I saw Christine get back into her car.
When I arrived some meters before the post office, I saw Christine making a U-turn right in front of the post office.
The third even said she'd seen Christine slip an envelope into the box. However, whoever posted the letter claiming the murder surely is the one who killed Gregory.
We therefore heard and reheard Christine Villemin several times, who always had a completely clear reaction, who said firstly, "They are wrong. I was not wearing the clothes they described that day," about which she was right. Second, she claimed that she had gone to the post office the day before. She told us, "I sent this and that letter the day before." We did some research. We found one of the 2 letters, a catalog. The second has not been found. Anyway, she answered in a completely logical and clear manner.
The gendarmes thus did not believe the post office girl's statements, but Judge Lambert did. He confronted Gregory's mother with her work colleagues. Christine was formal. She'd gone to the post office on the 15th. The girls said they'd seen her on October 16th.
She seemed to be bracing herself, as in a categorical refusal, saying, "I didn't go to the post office," while these 3 girls had seen her. Saying no, when there are 3 people who saw her, it was strange.
At this point, the judge had doubts. He was troubled by these contradictory testimonies.
I saw Lambert come out quite perplexed. For him, this step had to be taken. He had acquired, I think, if not a conviction, at least serious doubts. I felt that very well.
I find it strange that he responded to me coldly and told me I was lying.
Did he accuse you of lying?
He told me, "Mrs. Villemin, you are lying."
How do you feel about people suspecting you?
Not too good, of course. My little boy was the one to be kidnapped.
You are the victim in this affair. Do you feel as if people were trying to disturb the investigation process?
I do. Without my little boy, I've nothing left. It would have been absurd for me to do that.
All the lenses were now focused on her, Christine Villemin. What if it was the mother? The rumor was growing. It was an incredible accusation.
There was a kind of fascination. A mother capable of doing something like that? It seemed so extraordinary that some journalists clung to that idea. It was too good, and in quotes, it was too good. A mother doing such a thing. That mother who looked like an angel, who seemed like a very loving mother. If she'd have done that, it would have made her a legendary scumbag, a complete bitch. So many people clung to that image, refusing to let go of it, because it was just too good.
A mother's crime sells better than a cousin's jealousy. It's as simple as that.
Some journalists had thought about the mother being guilty from the beginning. They'd told the gendarmes several times, but they would not listen.
Captain Sesmat reportedly said, but I think I heard it myself, the mother? You must be out of your mind. It was not his first instinct to imagine that the mother could have killed her own child. So he didn't even try to eliminate this hypothesis with observations, with facts.
There was no search at the Villemin's house on the evening of the crime. No evidence were taken to verify that Christine was indeed ironing at the time of the kidnapping. The gendarmes have been resented for that.
There was no reason to search their home. Imagine that your car is stolen, so you go to the police station or the gendarmerie brigade, and the first thing the investigators say to you is, "Listen, dear sir, please come with me. We will see if you have not left it in your garage." You would seriously question the skills of the police or gendarmes. If there had been the slightest suspicion towards her, the slightest abnormality in her attitude, in her relationships, etc., we would have exploited it. I would have had no qualms about calling out Christine Villemin and saying that she was the culprit if that had been the case, but there wasn't anything that might accuse her.
The gap widens between the gendarmes on one side and Judge Lambert on the other. The former still believe in Laroche's guilt, while the judge increasingly believes in Christine Villemin's guilt. So Lambert took the investigation in hand. He no longer listened to the gendarmes. He was now acting on his own. But was the little judge strong enough for that? After all, that was his first big case.
He could have been a great judge one day, except that it's like everything, as if you were getting on a bicycle for the first time and competing in the Tour de France and all the journalists were there. Well, you won't finish the Tour de France and there's a good chance you won't climb the Tourmalet. That's what happened to him.
The young judge has now completely abandoned the trail of Bernard Laroche. The gendarmes are sidelined. He no longer asks them for any investigation or on-site verification. Nothing. And he himself is no longer interested in the suspects whom he nevertheless keeps in prison.
There was a particularity in this case. It is that indeed Bernard Laroche was kind of forgotten, if you can say, by the judge. He was put in jail, confronted. The confrontation confirmed Muriel Boll's retractions, and then he was forgotten for 3 months. He was questioned only once on the facts, and it was a 13-line report.
Which doctor, which expert psychiatrist examined him? Who took some more interest in him? I think no one. He stayed there and he became a kind of innocent by default.
In the end, Dominique, why was Bernard Laroche still in prison?
One may wonder. There had been Muriel Boll's testimony, but she'd recanted, so it no longer existed. There was the writing expertise, but again, they are no longer in the file. They were invalidated because Judge Lambert did not respect the law. He did not respect the procedure. He should have, under Article 156 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. designated writing experts by order. Instead of doing that, Judge Lambert asked the gendarmes to appoint the expert themselves. Obviously, the lawyer, Maitre Welser, jumped into the breach when he saw this, and Nancy's indictment chamber canceled a whole part of the procedure, in which there were the expert opinions. So the expert opinions no longer existed, they disappeared from the file, as if they'd never existed. We can mention them here when we talk about them, but from a judicial, criminal point of view, they no longer exist. That's it.
There was the paper imprint, these two initials which seem to be BL engraved in one of the letters of the crow.
New aberration in the file, all the expertise carried out around that imprint were lost.
Lost?
Lost.
Disappeared?
A gendarme from the Met's research section has been asked to work on the document, on the claim letter. He was the one to highlight the imprint thanks to a system of grazing light, and he photographed these letters, the L and the B, and he wrote down a correspondence sheet, and this correspondence sheet is an envelope in which he slips his findings. The photos and photo prints that he sent to the judge. And that envelope was lost. It was lost for years, until a judge, many years later, had the idea of asking the gendarmes if they had kept a duplicate. This sheet was found back. Here it is, for the first time. This is correspondence sheet 815-2 of November 12, 1984, written by a gendarme from the research section and sent to the judge.
It confirms the imprint.
It does confirms the existence of an imprint. Fortunately, the gendarme had kept a duplicate of the photos too.
But not in the file.
At that point, they're still lost.
The file was empty.
The folder was empty. There wasn't anything against Bernard Laroche anymore. And then the last absurdity of this file was the way in which the gendarmes exploited the famous claim letter. Hoping to find fingerprints on it, they covered it with a black powder which reveals the prints. The problem is that this powder has become embedded in the paper. So we see it here. This is a photocopy, but we can clearly see all this blackened part. Today, we have new electromagnetic means that could highlight the imprint. But we can no longer submit this document to the electromagnetic test because it is covered in powder. It is unusable.
There's definitely nothing in Bernard Laroche's file.
Nothing at all.
There wasn't really much against Christine Villemin either. And since the judge only had one lead, the crow's letters, he appointed new writing experts. Alain Bouquet was one of them, who would change everything. His conclusions formally contradicted the first expert reports.
We had to submit our report on February 15th. And a little before February 4, the judge called me and said, "Give me your conclusions." I told him, "Mr. Judge, no way." Besides, we had agreed that we would not give our conclusions. He told me, "Just tell me if it's Bernard Laroche." I said to him, "Why are you asking me that?" "Because if it's not him, I'll release him in 2 days." I told him, "It's not Bernard Laroche." My colleague was with me. We had taken this decision in order to release a guy who, for us, had nothing to do with it.
Judge Lambert therefore decided to release Bernard Laroche, against the advice of the prosecutor.
I opposed this release, but the investigating judge made his decision, and he is the boss. The prosecution is only proposing things.
Were you against it?
I was opposed to this release.
Why?
Because there weren't any sufficient element, in my opinion, not any new element allowing us to reverse the decision that had been taken before.
Twist in the investigation into the assassination of little Gregory. Bernard Laroche was released by the investigating judge but remains charged with murder.
In 3 months, Bernard Laroche's lawyers had won a great victory. They'd managed to get their client out of prison, even though he remained charged with murder. How did you, Mr. Welser, manage to convince Judge Lambert to let Bernard Laroche out?
You know, I believe that lawyers cannot make a file from something that is not a file. If we succeeded in getting Bernard Laroche out, it is because the file dictated the release of Bernard Laroche. We're not magicians. The lawyers said there is a file. Reality lies in the file. The truth, too. Writing expertise. Bernard Laroche out of the question. He is not the crow. Post office witnesses. Idem. So this is it. Every time there was a supposed element against Bernard Laroche, it actually wasn't against him. Well, at one point, it happened on February 4th, 1985. I present the investigating judge with yet another request for release. And the investigating judge accepted to release of Bernard Laroche. Why? Because he had the analysis of experts from the Court of Cassation. Writing experts. He has them there. They were completed. He must have had confirmation by telephone. They were completed, established. There were voluminous reports which confirmed the absence of Laroche at the post office, which confirmed the fact that Laroche was not the crow. From the moment Jean-Michel Lambert became aware of these writing expertises, he said to himself, I messed up.
How are you? It's nice to see you out of jail.
The scene took place in a small wood near Dijon. After 3 months in prison, Bernard Laroche reunited with his wife and son.
Come on, kiss your daddy.
A reunion for television. A team from the Sigma agency was specially recruited to immortalize this emotional moment. Gone is the image of the child murderer. Here is a good father, on a Sunday in the countryside.
You are innocent.
Yes. I can tell anyone. I am innocent and I hope that the real culprit will be found one day.
Do you know that there are people who are angry with you?
I suspect it.
Some even threaten to kill you. What do you have to say to these people?
I can tell them that it's not me, and that it won't help anyway. Killing me won't bring back little Gregory.
Indeed, Bernard Laroche was now free, but many still believed him guilty, and he was not protected. He shouldn't go home. And yet, after a few days spent in Burgundy, he was back in the Villemin Valley.
I thought they were going to move. Guilty or not guilty, I don't see myself returning to this particularly explosive family swarm. I thought he's going to leave, and no. He stayed there, his wife resumed her activities, etc. He started to work again.
For his return to the factory, cameras were obviously called for. A good father, good husband, good worker. Bernard Laroche was on his way to be fully rehabilitated.
This image of Bernard Laroche caused incredible wrath for Gregory's parents, because they were seeing the man who had been described to them as the murderer of their child, free, with his son while they no longer have theirs, at work while they have lost theirs. They are on sick leave, but they are no longer working.
Bernard Laroche started working again. He started having a normal life again.
It drove Jean-Marie Villemin crazy, because he could not bear that suspicions were beginning to be placed on his wife's head while Bernard Laroche had been released. He can't understand. Laroche had been released, but he was still charged. So for him, that meant he was still guilty.
What if it wasn't Bernard Laroche?
It's him.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Gregory's parents were still convinced that Laroche had killed their son, and some gendarmes were no strangers to it. Even away from the investigation, they sometimes visited the Villemins. One of them said one day to Jean-Marie, "If someone had done that to my son, I would know what I had to do."
Obviously, there are gendarmes who perhaps went a little too far, who perhaps spoke too affectionately or emotionally to Jean-Marie Villemin, who let the man in themselves speak, forgetting that said man was wearing a uniform.
The journalists also shared their opinion with Gregory's parents. They told them the story behind the release of Bernard Laroche and the lawyers' maneuvers to improve the image of their clients. Unwittingly, they stirred up passions. Christine and Jean-Marie Villemin also had a special relationship with Jean Kerr of Paris Match. They considered him their detective. On February 26th, Kerr came to see them in Bruyères, where they had taken refuge. He brought them a videotape. On a tape recorder, he had recorded the minutes of the hearing of Muriel Boll, word for word, while she denounced her brother-in-law Bernard Laroche. Christine and Jean-Marie listened for 3 hours, overwhelmed.
At the end of the tape, I told myself, maybe that was a bit strong. She told me I saw Gregory leaving in Laroche's hand. Then obviously, it was quite a moving moment, because Jean-Marie got up. He said to me, look, and threw something at me. I thought it was, I don't know, some object, but it was a shotgun. I received it in the arms like that, as if he'd thrown a broomstick, and said, what is that for? He told me, that's for killing Laroche. I said, are you crazy? You understand, Laroche. Don't you agree? I said yes. What would you do if it had been your son? Yes, for me. If that would be my son who was in Gregory's place, and with Laroche guilty, I would go kill him. Indeed, I couldn't live like that.
Jean-Marie and Christine were going to kill Laroche, no matter if someone came to arrest them afterwards. They'd already packed a prison bag on top of it. They'd put Gregory's photo.
As I was leaving, he started crying on my shoulder. Jean, you will come see us. I said no. You swore you wouldn't do anything. I won't go see you in prison. Are you kidding or what? Swear it. Otherwise, I'll stay here. I won't let you go and kill Laroche. He said to me, Jean, you can leave. We won't do anything tonight.
The journalist was reassured and returned to his hotel in Épinal. But at 4 a.m., Jean Kerr was seized with doubt. He decided to return to Bruyères. He rushed into the night. At the bottom of the building, the Villemin's white car was no longer there. Time was running out. He went to Almoncy, the village where Bernard Laroche lived.
And there, what did I see? At the War Memorial Crossroads, I saw Jean-Marie's white car with the engine running and Christine behind the wheel. I got out of the car, approached, and saw a shooter lying down, Jean-Marie kneeling against the monument aux morts, waiting for the arrival of Bernard Laroche. So I went in front of the hood of the car. I started gesticulating. Stop your bullshit now. I don't agree with that at all, he said to me. You cheered us up. Then you want to calm us down. I was at the hood of the car and Christine started to tell me, you're going to screw everything up. Get out, you bastard, etc. So I calmed them down. Now, Jean-Marie, stop your bullshit. Put your gun back in the car and come to the hotel. We're going to drink coffee. We're going to talk a little bit. You both stop your bullshit.
Twice, Jean Kerr had to intervene, making beacon lights to try to alert the Laroche family. Finally, Jean-Marie gave up.
And he said to me, do you know a hitman? I said, Jean-Marie, please stop. If I knew a hitman. And just as I was saying that, Laroche's car drove past us at full speed. And Jean-Marie said to me, well, you see, you saved Laroche's life, Jean.
For Jean Kerr, it was like a night-long nightmare. But why didn't he warn the police? Because he'd became friends with Christine and Jean-Marie Villemin, and they'd promised him not to do it again. But the rumor was growing. The Villemins wanted to kill Laroche.
Of course, a few days later, someone came to tell us that Villemin was watching him from up there. So I called Master Welser. He immediately warned the prosecutor that there was a threat.
We officially wrote, it must be March 6th, I think, or March 7th, 1985. We wrote to the public prosecutor, repeating these threats and requesting protective measures again.
Of course, a public prosecutor is not a bodyguard recruitment agency. Well, that's not planned. What is planned is to immediately inform the prefect, which is what I did. If there is anything to be done, which I don't know, well, perhaps you could do it. That's all.
What measures did the prefect take to avoid the worst? None.
Indeed, many people knew that there is potentially an issue, but there was no meeting to assess this problem, and there was no direction to take specific measures.
Jean-Marie Villemin was not disarmed, and Bernard Laroche did not benefit from any protection.
We didn't see anything, didn't see a gendarme to defend him, no one. I called the gendarmes myself. It lasted a quarter of an hour. And the gendarmes told me, so if something happens to your husband, it would be our fault? Well, it sure wouldn't be mine.
At that time, the gendarmes were officially set aside. Judge Lambert had now chosen to work with the Nancy Judicial Police, so the investigation started over from scratch or almost.
It was totally absurd because we were in a situation where no one was in control. In fact, there was a sort of judicial vacation at that time. The police were studying the file. They were not doing any field work yet. And so there was we could feel danger looming. It was extremely strange.
What a waste of time. The police did not even take the trouble to meet the gendarmes who had carried out the investigation so far. Especially since they were chasing new lead. A new culprit was looming on the horizon.
They did the very opposite of the gendarme investigation. One way to distance themselves from what the gendarmes had done so far was to put all the responsibility on Christine, so that the investigation went in a new direction.
Lawrence Lacour. It was a particular moment in the investigation. All the spotlights were on Christine Villemin. How did you journalists work then?
When the Nancy Judicial Police succeeded the gendarmes, they assumed that Christine Villemin was most certainly involved in this affair. But they had no element, there was absolutely nothing at the time, neither in legal matters nor otherwise, so they worked on the basis that psychological pressure would be yielding the most results. And for that, they would rely on the press. For instance, one of our colleagues, Jean-Michel Bazina, who at the time worked for a number of newspapers, RTL, the Central News Agency, the AP, which is an English agency, Le Parisien, Le Quotidien, Le Figaro, François, Le Journal du Dimanche.
Wow.
Indeed. And he turned out to be the longtime best friend of the commissioner in charge of this case. So the two of them obviously found a common interest there. One guy leaked information and the other relayed it. And everyone who was not part of that friendly relationship obviously was going to suffer from it. Meaning all the other journalists, including me, of course, but I was far from being the only one. We didn't have access to information, nor to the police headquarters, which was physically closed to us. The few times we showed up there, in particular to warn about the state of mind of Jean-Marie Villemin regarding Bernard Laroche, we were turned away. We were experiencing what we call the resonance chamber, meaning that information from the police went out in the 8 media that I have just cited, and we, by obligation and also out of weakness, I would say, we relayed it without being able to verify it.
Why a common interest?
First, because the police officer needed media pressure to weigh on Christine Villemin. And then because the journalist, selling the same piece of information 8 times in a day or a week, simply had a financial interest in selling it.
Didn't the journalist hold any stake in the investigation?
Obviously not in the investigation as such, except that he himself had had a conviction since the start of the case. His opinion was the same as the police's. Christine Villemin could be involved in this affair. And he had a kind of passion in wanting to spread this thesis, which was completely in line with that of the police officers.
It turned out that Jean-Michel Bazina was the one to announce on RTL that the investigation had changed, and that the #1 witness was now Christine Villemin.
Indeed, tomorrow around 2 p.m., Jean-Michel Lambert will notify Gregory's parents first, then Bernard Laroche, who still remains charged with the murder of the little boy, about the conclusions of the two handwriting experts. But everyone already knows that for the two experts, it was Christine Villemin, Gregory's mother, who probably wrote the letter claiming responsibility for the kidnapping and murder of the child.
How did the Villemins learn the news? Don't tell me they listened to the radio?
Yes, like that. They were in their car. These are people from the East who have always been used to listening to RTL. And at 8 p.m., they heard a reference to the death of their child. So they turned up the volume, and that's how they learned that Christine, the next day, would be named at the top of the list of potential suspects for the Crow. Obviously, their reaction was quite violent. I wasn't there, but they were stunned, I think, by the announcement.
Did they tell you so?
Yes, of course, they told me about it later. It was terrible. He held on to the steering wheel, she screamed. It was something very powerful for them. It turned out she was pregnant at the time, and had been for a short time. She started bleeding. I think she was extremely shocked. Yes, in the car. He was able to take her to a doctor who immediately ordered her hospitalized. And so she went to the hospital, lying in the back of the car. It was a tragic and very hard end to Sunday for them. The next day, of course, all the press was there waiting for this famous notification. And the pregnant woman's fainting, losing blood, was taken for an act. It was an additional step in the distortion of her character, of this young woman who, with each twist and turn, had something that turned against her, and became in a certain way a little bit evil. It was an image that stuck to her for years.
Whatever happened to her, it was against her.
Whatever she did or happened to her, it backfired.
We learned this morning that Christine Villemin had to be hospitalized last night as an emergency in this clinic in Épinal. For Mr. Grégory, the cause of this accident was obviously the moral torture caused by the rumors of recent weeks.
My client, as you know, is in the clinic, and I think the murderer must be happy with the result of all the harm she suffered. And with the real moral torture she has been suffering for several weeks. It's a great result.
For Christine Villemin, being pregnant so quickly after Gregory's death obviously was a way of moving forward. And now she was perhaps going to lose her second child. The journalists, of course, were laying siege to the clinic, and it was there at her hospital bed that Judge Lambert came to announce to Christine Villemin the result of the expert opinions. Her handwriting would be the one which presented the least discordance with that of the Crow.
It is obvious that the question of expertise and experts, above all, remains a big question mark for me. How can people who are very specialized in the same field say things that are radically opposite? For me, it remains a big mystery.
We did our job honestly. We had no interest in designating A or B, and yet we were dragged through the mud. We were called incompetent, etc. It was written in the press. It's quite unpleasant when you've honestly done your job. You know, for us, the easy solution would have been to accuse Laroche, who was already. And then that happened.
Jean-Marie Villemin found himself alone. His wife was hospitalized, openly suspected of having killed their son. Yet, he never doubted. For him, the assassin was still Laroche.
The more we saw him, the more it seemed obvious that he could do something stupid. We could feel that he was both extremely depressed and very aggressive.
Meanwhile, Bernard Laroche was free and still charged. His lawyers were now hoping for the charges to be quickly dropped.
I think I saw him again 2 or 3 days before his death. I told him, it seems that Jean-Marie is looming, etc. Be careful. He said to me, I'm not going to leave. I have no interest in leaving, and I won't leave. I have a clear conscience.
It was March 29, 1985, around 1 p.m. Marie-Ange Laroche called me, crying. Bernard Laroche had just been assassinated.
That day, I went to pick Bernard up from work. He was leaving at 1 p.m. And I put the car in front of the house, at the basement door. And when we were practically in the basement, we heard a sound of jumping, someone jumping an embankment. We turned around and saw Jean-Marie Villemin with the rifle. He told me, "It's your fault if they're all on Christine." I remember that Bernard replied, "I understand you, but I swear to you, on my kid's life, it's not me, I didn't kill your kid." That's what they said. But he didn't want to hear anything. It happened very quickly.
And at that moment,
boom.
A round of buckshot. Laroche was hit in the chest. He collapsed and died before his wife's eyes.
Many things fell apart at that moment, because that very day I had just learned that I was pregnant. So afterward you have to grin and bear it. You feel a little lost, don't know what you're going to do, what you're going to become. It's a lot to handle.
Before turning himself in to the police, Jean-Marie returned to the clinic. He wanted to announce the murder to his wife himself. "That day," he said, "I had sorrow in my veins."
I would not like to be in Jean-Marie Villemin's place because he has permanently cut himself off from the truth. For me, that's what horrified me the most. Apart from the death of a man, it's always horrible. The question is not there. He, who was the father, he cut himself off from the truth. It's stupid. It's stupid, and I told him. I should have told him something else, by the way. I told him it's stupid. What you did is stupid, because you'll never know the truth.
And as always in this affair, the media went beyond the limits. Bernard Laroche was on the front page of Paris Match, on his deathbed. On the inside page, Marie-Ange was begging people to listen for reason. She prayed for the clan war to stop. Bernard Laroche was murdered barely 2 months after his release from prison, neither guilty nor innocent. It was a severe failure for justice.
L'échec est sévère pour la justice.
Lawrence Lacour, the day after the death of Bernard Laroche, Christine Villemin let you know that she would like you to call her. Right?
Yes. She called the Europe 1 editorial team in Paris. People didn't have a cell phone back then. One couldn't be contacted directly. And she let them know that she wanted to talk to me. For me, it was almost a curse. It was both a blessing and a curse. At the time, that day, everyone was wondering what role she could possibly have played in this tragedy.
Had she known? Had she encouraged him?
Yes, and did she make any revelations to him? It was peak fabulation on that day. And that was the question that haunted everyone, even the streets.
Let's listen.
Hello, Christine.
Yes?
Hello, how are you?
Oh, you know, not too good. I didn't think he was going to do that at all.
Didn't he tell you about it yesterday morning?
Not at all. I don't know what got into him. He had to return by 9.
There is already a first point that I would like to raise. You were familiar to her?
Yes, of course, because we journalists have been living there for 6 months practically. So we were often meeting them. We are the same age. So it's true that it was very easy to access these young people. And so we speak to them on familiar terms. We have drinks with them, coffees with them.
Are you friends?
No, we are not friends, but as a reporter in the east of France, I regularly came to the region for any other subject. And inevitably, I would take the detour to go see them, even if nothing was happening. It's true that I was fascinated by their story, their tragedy, and their pain. Me, at 27 years old, I had never seen pure pain like that. It was something that inspired my thoughts, my actions. And it's true that over time I formed bonds of sympathy and reciprocal esteem. So I think that's why naturally she thought of calling me that morning to tell me her version of the death of Bernard Laroche.
He told me he killed Laroche. I didn't believe him. He got on his knees and started screaming. I tell you that I killed Laroche. I asked him why. He told me. I wanted to go there with the gun to talk. And then, he made fun of me. He told me I deserved it.
Bernard Laroche was making fun?
Yes. He told him, "We need to talk." Then Laroche told him, "I have nothing to tell you." Jean-Marie said to him, "What do you mean? And what do you think of Muriel's testimony?" So Laroche said to him, "I don't know why she told that." Then they came to the expert opinions. There, Laroche said, "Anyway, the expert opinions had been paid for to screw your wife." And he made fun of him. That's where Jean-Marie shot. He told me, "I swear I would never have shot, but he was the one who pushed me." He got on his knees. He couldn't stop screaming. I didn't think he was going to do that at all.
What did he say to you when you left?
He said to me, "I love you very much. Think of me. Think of the little one. Wait for me." Please understand I had to do it. I had to.
Did at some point you journalists working in the field at the time, did you feel responsible in part for the death of Bernard Laroche?
Yes, of course. Of course, all the journalists who had participated in the first 6 months of this affair had necessarily, in one way or another, contributed to the rotting of this atmosphere, to forging the opinion of Christine and Jean-Marie Villemin. And to obtain an interview, it was easier to speak ill about Bernard Laroche and his wife, in order to be sure of having the document one needed. This extremely perverse game resulted, though these are not the only causes, but it resulted in that tragedy within the tragedy, for sure. Of course, some journalists cried. The first evening, the atmosphere was heavy at the hotel where we were all gathered. It was very, very heavy.
Was it the beginning of some soul searching?
Not really. There were two types of reactions. Those who sank into nightmares, sometimes depression, who experienced their own involvement very badly. And then those who didn't want to know anything and who blamed everything on a third party, who in this case was Christine Villemin, who really served as a lightning rod for the feeling that gnawed at all journalists about their own involvement and guilt in this affair.
Christine Villemin was now alone. Her child murdered, her husband in prison. Alone, facing the suspicions of the police and the accusations of the media. It wasn't easy for her lawyers, Mr. Garreau joined by Ms. Chaston-Morand, to defend her and above all to protect her.
It was the hunt for Christine Villemin, to such an extent that we wondered at the time if there was not a use, in some way, of the press to try, through harassment articles that were extremely unfavorable to her, to make her break down. Though, there was an immeasurable difficulty in that, which is that innocent people do not break down.
She didn't break down, but the police remained convinced that Gregory's mother was the culprit, and they told their journalist friends, and these journalists inevitably said so in their articles.
It was so hard to believe that it could be the mother. That public opinion had to be prepared. Public opinion must be able to accept this so monstrous hypothesis. So they would throw out stuff, which the journalists would pounce on. And the journalists were used by the cops to stir up public opinion.
In criminal cases, there always are links between investigators and journalists. That's how journalists get information. There is always manipulation, clearly, but that was going beyond manipulation. That is to say, they were moving hand in hand to accuse Christine Villemin.
Behind the scenes, journalists were now divided. Everyone had their own personal conviction, for or against Christine. The articles became op-eds.
Oh yes, it was a Civil War atmosphere. That may seem like a bit of a strong term to you. It was an atmosphere where people were hating each other.
But there was still nothing in Christine Villemin's file. No confession, no direct witness to the crime, no incontestable material evidence. There were only suspicions. It was then that, in the house in Lépanges, where the Villemin no longer lived, the police found pieces of cord. They were immediately presented by the press as being identical to those found on Gregory's body. There was the connection between Christine and the crime, except that it was fragile proof. These strings were much common. An uncle of Jean-Marie also had a ball of such cord, and the Villemins had left this house 6 months earlier.
There were people coming and going in this house. I'm not saying that someone had put the cords there, that's not the question. But there had been enough comings and goings for it not to be a determining factor. And even if it had been decisive, before putting someone in pretrial detention, there must be serious, precise, and consistent presumptions. That is what the law says. In my eyes, this was insufficient. You have to be more demanding before putting someone in pretrial detention.
The string's evidence may not have been very convincing, but Judge Lambert was under pressure. The journalists were waiting for the culprit to be handed over to them.
When a journalist said, in Judge Lambert's office, when are you going to indict this bitch? Speaking of Christine Villemin, these really were intolerable remarks which also show, I would say, the degree of intimacy that there was at a certain moment between the judge and journalist.
It was some kind of agreement. It would suit everyone. It would suit everyone's fantasies and delusional constructions, if it were her. Well, so be it. It would be her. And then, if she died, people wouldn't give a damn.
In a letter to her husband, Christine wrote, I can't stand it anymore. You will never be able to imagine the horrors they write about me. Since you have been in prison, everyone has been against me. I am exhausted. At the beginning of July, 2 damning expert opinions arrived on the judge's desk. Christine Villemin was the crow. The cords were identical to those which had bound the child. Christine Villemin was charged with the murder of her son.
Christine Villemin, the mother of little Grégory, was charged with the murder of her son by the investigating judge. She was immediately imprisoned. Christine Villemin was still unfettered when she appeared before Judge Lambert at the Épinal courthouse. It was 4:30 p.m. 2 hours later, she was charged with intentional homicide against her son Grégory and imprisoned in Metz. Indicted, and not guilty. It is not superfluous to recall it in this affair that is so fertile in dramatic twists and accusations without proof.
To accuse this woman of such an atrocity was irreparable. The irreparable had been done.
L'irréparable a été commis.
Christine Villemin used to be a victim. Now she was presumed guilty. Definding her from Paris was now out of question. Maître Garot called on this man, Thierry Moser, a lawyer from the region. You, Mr. Moser, joined Christine Villemin's team of lawyers on the day of her indictment. And this particular moment took place in the investigating judge's office.
Yes, I met with Henri Garot in Épinal. We went to the courthouse together. And then we saw a considerable crowd there. In particular, in the waiting room of the investigating judge, we saw poor Christine, whom I was first meeting, and we saw the police officers from Nancy, who were behaving arrogantly, unpleasantly. So Henri Garot and I firmly invited them to leave this waiting room, so that we could remain alone with Ms. Christine Villemin. You see, the indictment of Christine was the consecration of the efforts of the police, who had aimed at implicating little Gregory's poor mother, and at demonstrating that they, these gentlemen from the police, were wiser than the gendarmerie soldiers. So Henri Garot and I firmly invited them to leave the waiting room.
Did they leave?
They did, without arguing. I met Christine, with Henri Garot making the introductions. I saw a young woman. She was young, pretty, moving. She was sobbing, she was revolted, and she knew very well what was going to happen.
The indictment of Christine Villemin was a truly special moment.
It was frightening. We entered this cramped office. Judge Lambert was looking at the tips of his shoes. He didn't even have the courage to look us in the eye. And then this completely atypical, completely astonishing magistrate. This magistrate says this, well, madam, I'm going ahead, I'm going to lift the mortgage and I'm going to burst the abscess. And madam, I'm charging you with murder about your child. He said, I'm going to have a go. I'm going to clear the air and I'm going to root out the evil. Really, it's absolutely astonishing. And so at that moment, Christine Villemin screamed, it's not possible. You're crazy. What are you doing? Henri Guéraud and I, of course, protested again, and at that moment, Jean-Michel Lambert let us know that he was going to organize what we call in our jargon the contradictory debate, that is to say, a discussion during which the judge plans to place the accused in so-called provisional detention.
And Christine Villemin was sent to prison, where she immediately began a hunger strike which lasted 5 days, even though she was 6 months pregnant. From his cell, Jean-Marie immediately followed suite in solidarity. Incredible fate for this couple, this father and this mother, who 9 months after the death of their child, both found themselves in prison, both accused of murder, and who were more united than ever. But even if Christine Villemin were guilty, one question was still unanswered. Why did she commit such a heinous crime?
It seems to me that people had lost sight of a fundamental element, which was the love that this woman had for her child. And that was completely fundamental because, for me, there is no such thing as a crime without a motive.
How can we imagine that this mother of a child, who in the eyes of everyone loves her husband, cherishes her child, how could she have such a Machiavellian attitude for more than 3 years to turn her entire family against her, relying on the theme of hatred against husband and launching threats against her own child until she managed to kill him? This is pure madness. If that was true, then it was madness. And if it were, we would have seen it.
Madness is the judge's only hypothesis to explain the action of Gregory's mother. As soon as she was incarcerated, the judge rushed to have her examined by experts.
Mrs. Villemin was heard by 11 psychiatrists or psychologists, I mean the two professions combined, 11 specialists from Paris and from Lyon. And there was absolutely nothing in the file that could possibly fill the absence of motive, which was sorely lacking.
Meanwhile, some journalists arrived on the investigation and did not believe that Christine Villemin could have killed her son. So they played detectives, once again. With a stopwatch in hand, they drove along the small roads of the Vosges to check if the mother could have time to commit the crime and claim responsibility for it.
We too transformed ourselves into detectives. Not to find the culprit, that's not our job, but to make sure a miscarriage of justice was not happening. That's our job as journalists. Everything happened between approximately 5 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. on October 16th, 1984. 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. Exactly how much time did the assassin have? Did Christine Villemin even have the time to commit the crime for which she is still charged? We timed the Lépanges d'Ossel journey several times on this narrow and winding road where no one saw her that day, a road often clogged with tractors and herds. Given the 3 minutes to tie up the child, Christine Villemin would have required over 19 minutes for the round trip at a fast pace, with a small car in poor condition and without any incidents. She couldn't have done what she did in that time frame. So after that, we were pretty sure of ourselves. Then some people were saying he accidentally drowned in the bathtub. So he was bathing, he was naked in his bathtub, he drowned, she panicked. So what would she be doing? She would have to dress him. It's impossible to dress someone like that who is inert. That alone would have taken Gur half an hour. So this is all rubbish.
But the verdict of the stopwatches and the counter-investigations of the journalists didn't matter. Reality didn't matter since Christine Villemin has been overtaken by her fictional character.
If she was an ordinary woman, she had no reason to kill her child. So people made up some Machiavellian, calculating character, which, in my opinion, she was not.
The height of madness was reached when the newspaper Libération decided to send the novelist Marguerite Duras to Lépanges. She was not asked to investigate, but to feel. And when she arrived in front of Christine and Jean-Marie's house, Marguerite Duras cried out like a clairvoyant. The crime existed. And she pictured the moods of a mother unsatisfied in her relationship, a sort of modern-day Madame Bovary. The article was a scandal.
She was intervening in a judicial case at a very critical moment, a truly crucial moment. And she was pressing on a suspect, making her guilty. And then it was very messed up, because she both said that Christine was guilty and that she could understand her. So it's even worse in the end, because she found her a motive on top of it all. She invented her a motive.
Part of the press was in complete delirium, but the prosecutor who had opposed the indictment of Christine Villemin still considered that the accusation did not hold up.
People can think what they want about a suspect's psychological state, but it still has to be supported by some elements. Bernard Laroche, for instance, there were statements against him. True or false, I don't know and I can't know now. But there was someone who had accused him, who was perhaps lying, I don't know. At least there was that. But regarding Christine Villemin, there simply was nothing. No one had accused her. It was. The file, in my eyes, was empty.
New twist in the affair. Christine Villemin was released after 11 days in prison. It was a snub for Judge Lambert. The decision had been made by the Nancy Court of Appeal, for whom the case was definitely not solid enough. Christine took refuge with her family in Alsace, of course followed by the paparazzi. And this is where Maître Grégory concluded a financial arrangement with Paris Match. The magazine gave him 250,000 francs, and in exchange, he renounced some old defamation proceedings against the newspaper, and as a bonus, he gave Paris Match the exclusivity of the photos of Christine Villemin's future baby. This is how the lawyer could pay his fees, and in the process, give a new image of his client.
Initially, the idea was to fight with the same weapons that were used against her. Articles, writings, and images were used at the same time against her. Mainly photos of women wearing black clothes, in a dark mood, hiding behind the lens of the photo. Which could therefore be interpreted in a completely unsympathetic and harmful way towards her.
In mid-October '85, here was Christine Villemin, radiant, on the front page of Paris Match, holding her baby Julien in her arms. Her lawyers were at her side to share this moment of happiness. It was a long way from the image of the infanticidal mother.
People were disgusted to see this mother, this young mother, beaming and smiling, while they had expected her to be mourning, in tears, wearing black, and certainly not engaging in financial transactions with Paris Match.
A few weeks later, Marie-Ange Laroche poses with her newborn Jean Bernard, son of her murdered husband. The contrast is striking. The young widow is a mother in black.
I agreed to take these photos for the tranquility of the hospital itself, because there was, I can't tell you the numbers, so my lawyer came to ask me if there was a possibility, if I wanted, if I accepted, to receive a photographer to share my son's photo, so that everyone would be happy and everyone would leave. I agreed, and this photo was released for free.
Christine Villemin's lawyers persisted in their strategy. They negotiated a new series of paid documentaries with Paris Match. They went even further. The photos were taken by an agency specializing in celebrity pictures, the Jet Set Agency. With makeup and specially dressed for the occasion, Christine's metamorphosis was complete.
These pictures lack sincerity, and it feels. I think that public opinion feels it instinctively. And people went on thinking, someone who is not sincere is someone who killed their son.
And that's not all. Christine Villemin also published a book with Michel Lafon, a publisher specializing in star memoirs at that time. Let Me Tell You was meant to be a cry of innocence. People did not understand. The VSD magazine, Paris Match's first competitor, denounced the excesses of judicial marketing. Christine Villemin made a bestseller to get rich.
People were not fooled. They could see that it all was fabricated, fake, and reeked of money. But the Villemins needed money to defend themselves. They would ultimately have to pay 1.7 or 1.8 million francs. I speak in francs, in lawyers' fees. Where do you think they could find that money? At some point, they had to get the money somewhere. They were forced to defend themselves in a system from which they could not escape.
Christine Villemin's lawyers had wanted to change that image of an infanticide mother. But by making her the star of People magazines, they achieved exactly the opposite effect. The English weekly Sunday Times wrote, "She has become the most hated woman in France." I would like you to explain to me under what circumstances Michel Lafon was led to publish Christine Villemin.
At that moment, Christine Villemin had just been released from prison. She was still charged with the murder of her own child, but she was released, and at this moment in the story, Michel Lafon wished to meet her. Michel Lafon left for Lépanges with Mr. Grégory, who left him with Christine Villemin for almost a day. They talked to each other. They walked. They had lunch. She spoke about her situation, her version of the facts, her version of the story. And then everything happened very, very quickly. The book was written almost in a weekend with a colleague from the publishing house who, the very next day, came to Lépanges. And they spent 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, interviewing, recording, and writing during the night, almost in the week that followed. That is to say, that at that point, we decided to compress the time it takes to produce a book. We were in an immediate event. We had the opportunity to have the testimony of Christine Villemin.
She was unpopular. This is what I have trouble understanding. She was hated by a whole part of France, but a popular publisher like Michel Lafon took this risk?
France was divided. As in major political or national debates, Christine Villemin was at the center of a real controversy. First, around this affair. Who is the murderer? We still don't know today. Michel Lafon had a conviction. First, he considered that Christine Villemin could not be guilty. It's his belief. Not facts or evidence. He didn't investigate.
This was completely innovative for a publisher.
Sure.
It was. Since then, it has become a precedent.
What was new was going directly to the witness of a story to give them the floor directly. This could pose a lot of problems, and in particular, judges pointed this out, not only judges in the Nancy region, but also in Paris, saying, "Be careful, you are replacing justice." At that time, the question was not to say, is Christine Villemin guilty or not? We as publishers rightly thought that she was an exceptional character in an affair that went beyond everything you could imagine.
Dominique, overall, how was the question of money handled in this Gregory affair?
From the outset, it must be said that the Gregory affair generated money like no news item had ever generated money. To the extent that the Villemins, Gregory's parents, explained it in a book, writing as follows: "Despite 8 years of silence, not a month goes by without a newspaper talking about us or someone dishonoring us. However, we have done. So we decided to get things straight, showing everything, our memories, pain, love, letters, and even our ledgers. And it's all there, it's all in this book. What the affair brought to the Villemins is in this book. This is the financial report of 9 years' affairs. There we can read that the Villemins gave 1,800,000 francs. People still paid in francs in 1994, 10 years after the start of the affair. They gave it all to their lawyers. The lawyers' fees were, at first, for the cost of the procedure, since they were civil parties in the murder of their child Gregory. And then the case changed in nature. Lawyers like Mr. Grégory, who'd initially arrived to defend victimized parents, ended up defending Jean-Marie Villemin. indicted and charged with murder. Then Christine Villemin was in turn be suspected of the murder. That's why the lawyer's fees were huge. 1,800,000 francs. And then we can also read how much money the Villemins earned with this case. The biggest sum coming in was a total of 2.5 million francs.
But how do you earn money when you are a victim or accused?
You can earn money by writing a book with Michel Lafont, 357,000 francs. By selling interviews and exclusive photos, 600,000 francs to Paris Match. And then by winning defamation cases. Indeed, Jean-Marie and Christine Villemin had sued media, newspapers, and televisions a lot. So that makes a difference of 700,000 francs. This was a 700,000 francs profit for them. But they never benefited from it, since the civil conviction of Jean-Marie Villemin for the murder of Bernard Laroche amounted to more than 900,000 francs. More than 900,000 francs that went to beneficiaries of Bernard Laroche.
I believe that in big cases like this one, lawyers came to advertise their services. Because of TV and media, it was a way to make yourself known. For example, Mr. Welser, who was not very well known before, became famous after the affair. Not enough? Did they have to charge fees?
At some point, even a law office cannot bear such a financial burden. Lawyers often agree to defend major clients for free because, as you said, it's advertisement for their office. But it still costs them a lot of money. Parisian lawyers who come to Vallon Valley once a week for 4 or 5 years, that implied enormous expenses. Nowadays, it happens on a fairly regular basis. Recently, for instance, Patrick Dill's lawyer sold the exclusive interview with Patrick Dills to TF1 upon his release from prison. He explained it. He said why. Patrick Dill's family could not pay his fees. So he received part of the money from that sale.
2 years after Gregory's death, Judge Lambert had completed his investigation. Christine Villemin was accused of the murder of her son because her handwriting resembled that of the crow, because residents of the village had seen her post a letter on the day of the crime, which might have been that of the crow, and because she'd owned ropes resembling those which had bound the boy's body. That's why Judge Lambert requested her referral to the circuit court. People from the criminal division agreed with him. A major trial was coming and would undoubtedly cause a media frenzy.
This judgment could not constitute a declaration of guilt.
Une déclaration de culpabilité.
It also left many important questions unanswered, particularly regarding the mobile. Unfortunately, Christine Villemin's legal ordeal was continuing.
The criminal division made around 15 documents from Judge Lambert void because of procedural defects. For instance, reconstructions at the crime scene were overturned because the judge had forgotten to make the witnesses sign their statement. The lawyers were preparing their defense strategy.
For Ms. Christine Villemin, at the time of the events in this judgment, there was an enormous risk to be convicted rather than acquitted. Not really because of the charges, but rather because she had given a distorted image of herself. And nothing was telling us that this distortion of her image would have been restored in a few days of trial. Nothing.
Then, the referral to the court for Christine Villemin to be referred to the circuit court, that was unspeakable. For her, it was a terrible decision. Actually, she unfortunately attempted suicide shortly after that.
It is in this house, at her grandmother's in Petitmont, that Christine Villemin was found this morning, inanimate, after having abused barbiturate. She was transported to the intensive care unit of Luneville Hospital. It seems that she isn't about to die anymore.
Christine Villemin had sent a farewell letter to her lawyer. She wrote that she was innocent, that she wanted to join Gregory, that she would not withstand the trial.
I really think that this woman has experienced the worst that a human being can experience outside of war. I think that's the worst thing you can experience. Losing a child and being accused of it. I believe that at some point, everyone should walk in her shoes for a second. Losing a child and being accused of killing him, I think that in times of peace, there's nothing worse you can experience. Nothing.
The young judge had finished his work. Christine would be sent back to court, and he, from now on, would benefit from his notoriety. He took a sabbatical, wrote a book, was featured in the Apostrophe show, and did an internship in the Europe 1 editorial team. For Judge Lambert, everything was definitely going well. For Christine Villemin, the hope came from the Court of Cassation. Exceptionally, the High Court overturned the referral decision. It also overturned more than 300 pages of instruction files because formal defects. The entire file needed to be revised.
I think, and it's my own personal opinion, that the senior magistrates of the Court of Cassation who approached this file and who examined it carefully, they thought, it's quite weird, really. There were doubts that had not yet been truly dispelled at that stage.
The senior magistrates then decided to entrust the case to the Dijon court. The Gregory affair left the Vosges region and its passions.
I believe they thought that this case deserved a chance for a richer investigation, which would be conducted by a professional in a quieter way.
That professional was called Maurice Simon. He led the Dijon criminal division. He was about to retire, but postponed his retirement in order to lead this investigation himself. He ordered for additional information to be searched for. He used different methods in the investigation, and with the press, a different tone. It was a striking contrast with the former judge.
He completely threw us out of the case. He imposed rigorous secrecy on everyone, on the lawyers, on the accused, on all the parties. Nobody was thinking of leaking information anymore. It went from one extreme to the other. We go from cacophony to total silence.
He was the total opposite of Lambert. He would not say anything. He'd smile, but he wouldn't say anything.
Mr. Judge, what do you expect from this reconstruction?
On the ground, Chairman Simon started the investigation over as if the crime had just happened. He organized 3 days of reconstruction, questioned all the witnesses again. He flew over the valley in a helicopter and interviewed Christine and Jean-Marie Villemin at length. On Christmas Eve 1987, the judge made a merciful decision. He released Jean-Marie after 33 months of preventive detention. He was banned from the Vosges, so the couple settled in the Essonne area near Paris. Years later, in their only television interview, Christine and Jean-Marie said that Judge Simon had restored their faith in justice.
He let us talk. We had a magistrate before us who asked us a question, but who didn't cut us off. He wasn't trying to tell us, no, you're lying or looking for the wrong thing. He let us talk. He scrupulously wrote down everything that we said to him.
For the first time, I was heard by a man who understood and paid heed to my pain. Nobody had paid heed to our pain before. And then, when he told me that he would do everything in his power to discover the truth, I was a man who truly was ready to do anything. It wasn't just words. It was in his eyes, too. There, I regained trust.
The lovers came back together.
Yes.
This is perhaps the opportunity for us to evoke the strength of the bond between this man and this woman, really.
If this couple hadn't been so close-knit, well, that would have been the end of them. Some people often made fun of my great colleague Grégory when he'd say, my little couple, speaking about them. Well, Henri Grégory was right. They really were a close-knit couple, and to this day, they still are as close-knit. They still love each other.
The Villemins were now together again, but Judge Simon seemed to fall victim to the curse of the Vologne Valley. Detective, the most sensationalist of magazines, published a supposedly exclusive interview with the judge.
The mess it made. My cheerful colleagues entered the fray straight away. They said that it was a scandal that Judge Simon was giving an interview. When I saw all the commotion that was causing, I was very afraid that I had done something wrong.
This so-called interview was actually an informal conversation that had been recorded by the journalist without the knowledge of the magistrate. The magazine had then rewritten it in the form of questions and answers, giving off the feeling that President Simon had strayed off course too and started leaking confidential info.
It is true that staging these few words, collected from the judge, it turned the case upside down. It really did. From the day this interview came out, he had a target on his back, especially since in the paper he supposedly had made comments about the innocence of Christine Villemin. It was the first time these things had been said and people found it intolerable.
The magistrate had indeed become convinced of the innocence of Gregory's mother. But if it's not her, then it's him. It's Bernard Laroche. The Laroche lead was picked up again. His lawyers were furious and attacked the judge.
Very shortly afterwards, a complaint was filed against him for leaking confidential information. That was terrible for a magistrate who, for 42 years, had always protected confidential information. He had a heart attack 2 days after that complaint, and he never recovered.
This heart attack left Maurice Simon very weak. He had to give up the investigation. He died shortly after, leaving the work unfinished. The new chairman of the criminal division, Jean-Paul Martin, was the third magistrate to inherit the lead in the Gregory case. He continued where Judge Simon had left off and decided to hear the new owner of the Lépanges house, Charlotte Conroe, who bought it from the Villemins in the summer of 1986. Ms. Claudin, a neighboring farmer, had allegedly entrusted her with a secret. On the day and at the time of Gregory's kidnapping, she'd been going to pick up her cows by car with a friend when she came across a green car near the Villemin house.
She saw 2 people in that car. According to the newspapers and magazines, she said it was Mr. Laroche. He had the same sweater, the same mustache and sideburns. She said he was the man in the green car the day of the tragedy.
The investigators found the friend of the farmer, a certain Mr. Collin, who had said nothing until now. And he confirmed it. He even showed the police the exact place where he'd encountered the green car on October 16th. It was here, on this narrow road between the Claudin farm and the Villemin house. He also gave details about the occupants of the vehicle.
Mr. Collins saw a portly man as the driver and a woman with red hair in the right front seat. He saw them in that green car.
Ms. Claudin, for incomprehensible reasons, refused to repeat her story about the green car to the gendarmes. And investigators believe that other witnesses were remaining silent.
People preferred to remain silent rather than to end up on the newspaper's headers. They were thinking, if I speak, I'm going to end up in the spotlight, and I'm going to be in trouble. That was the big issue.
For Judge Martin, the time had come to close the investigation file. So he wrote, "There are very serious charges that Bernard Laroche kidnapped Gregory." Kidnapped, perhaps, but killed. He didn't have the slightest piece of evidence. Laroche was dead. The investigation ends there. After 9 years, the investigation ended in failure. Where, when, how, and above all, who killed little Gregory? Justice was unable to answer any of these 4 questions. The judge, however, had one certainty. Christine Villemin was innocent. On February 3rd, 1993, he dismissed the case in her favor and wrote that her participation in the assassination of her son was both improbable and impossible. For the first time, French justice dismissed a case for a complete lack of charge. The case was officially dismissed, And immediately, all experts in the law said that it was a historic dismissal, right?
Yes.
Why?
Not only was it requested by all the parties involved, but more importantly, it wasn't because of insufficient charges as benefit of the doubt, but for a complete lack of charges. That judgment of February 1993 stated, without any ambiguity, without any restriction, that the mother was absolutely and incontestably innocent. It stated that, firstly, she did not have the concrete possibility of carrying out the crime, and secondly, that she had no motive, no reason to do so.
In other words, that dismissal meant that the file was empty.
There was nothing in the file. More than a case dismissal, it was a rehabilitation for her. Gregory's mother had finally been done justice. But I would say that justice is done judicially, but not in the media. Unfortunately, in February 1993, the media did not seem much interested in that dismissal. And above all, justice is not done to little Gregory, because, despite the efforts of Mr. Simon, his assassin was not unmasked in February 1993.
Then came the trial of Jean-Marie Villemin for the assassination of Bernard Laroche. Jean-Marie Villemin had to be tried for the assassination of Laroche. There were two options, two proposals made to you lawyers. You could choose a short trial. How many days does that mean?
Vous avez la possibilité de choisir un procès court, ça veut dire combien de jours?
3 days.
Or a long trial?
That was 6.5 weeks, almost 7.
Why did you pick the long trial?
We wanted the long trial because we wanted to try to use it with the possibility of an oral debate. We wanted to use that trial to try to bring out the truth. This was a last chance trial. The various witnesses involved in the Villemin affair were all called to the Dijon Circuit Court.
You choose to debate about the Gregory affair rather than the murder of Bernard Laroche.
Absolutely, because we were hoping, unfortunately in vain, hoping to bring out the truth thanks to our questions. Miss Muriel Ball, in particular, was a key witness in that case. She was heard for almost 4 or 5 days. And we were indeed hoping to finally be able to identify the murderer of little Gregory, but we weren't, and it was a huge disappointment in this regard.
A year's suspended sentence, and since he had already been preventatively held, he was released 2 weeks later. Mr. Moser, do you have the keys to this merciful verdict?
It was a merciful verdict, one meant to appease. He'd killed
a father.
Absolutely. The court was, I think, very remarkable. They stated, through this verdict, that one must not kill. Killing is prohibited by law and morality. But the court also stated that they paid heed to the motivation of this unfortunate man. They paid heed to his feeling of having been betrayed by the justice system, and by the investigating judge in particular. So that verdict sought to reconcile seemingly contradictory needs. This is high-quality justice, and I must say that this verdict has indeed brought us a lot of peace, a lot of relief, and has given Jean-Marie Villemin his freedom back.
18 years later, we cannot answer the questions that are completely fundamental, namely where, when, how, why.
It would need someone denouncing themselves. Someone saying, it was me. No one would do that. I don't think we'll ever know the truth.
I think people have retreated into silence. It's like a family secret that is passed on before dying. Then it stays between us.
I don't think we'll ever know the truth. It's too late. We will never be able to prove anything unless one day someone on the verge of death feels remorse and says, this is how it really happened. Otherwise, we'll never know.
For years and years, I have had it deep inside me, and I say it, and I say it again. I think that, someday, we will know. It may take a long time, but I have hope. I know it. I know we'll know the truth someday. Because you can't live with such a thing waiting on your conscience. It would be inhumane, or someone without a heart. It's not possible. One day or another, truth will come out.
The Gregory case had not yet been closed for justice. It will not be until 2011. Christine and Jean-Marie Villemin now live near Paris with their 3 children, almost as nobodies. Sometimes the case resurfaces in court and in the press for requests for compensation for Christine's imprisonment. DNA analyzes on a letter from the Crow, or appeals to have the state recognize its faults in the investigation. We will probably never know who killed Gregory. Certainly justice restored Christine Villemin's honor.
Mais ce fut au final un incroyable gâchis judiciaire.
But in the end, it was an incredible legal waste. A waste.